Sourdough. It seems everyone is baking it at the moment, and many will discover the joy of this age-old way of baking bread. Many would also probably have tried and then sworn never again. The mysticism around it is unhelpful. It makes it feel challenging and unattainable, and I want to dispel those myths and demonstrate how simple and low-stress baking sourdough can be. You don't need a lot of tools, you don't need an electric mixer, you just need a bit of patience and the acceptance that you may fail once or twice along the way. If you take one thing away from this video, it's this: make sure your starter is healthy and vigorous. If not, then feed it until it is. You will not get good bread if your starter is not healthy. To feed the sourdough, remove half the starter and feed the remaining starter double its weight in flour and water. For example, if you have 50 grams of starter, feed it 50 grams of flour and 50 grams of water. If you feed it first thing in the morning, then it should be good to bake 5 to 7 hours later. It's ready if it feels light and airy, with bubbles dimpling its surface, and it has a sweet and yeasty smell. To make the loaf, first add your water to a mixing bowl, and then add 60 grams of ripe starter and mix it in. When your starter is ready to bake with, it should float upon the surface of the water. If it sinks, it's not active enough to bake with. Add your flour. In this case, I'm using a mixture of strong white and white spelt flour. As long as roughly 3/4 of the flour is strong white, you should be good to go in using any flour you like. If you're just starting, I would recommend going for 100% strong white, as this gives the best gluten structure and removes one variable from the process. Combine the flour, water and starter thoroughly and scrape down the sides of the bowl to incorporate all the flour. A flexible plastic dough scraper is great for this, but a spoon works well too. Cover with a damp cloth and leave to AUTOLYSE for 30 minutes to an hour. Now incorporate your salt by mixing it with a small amount of water and add to the bowl. Lift the dough with your hands, allowing the sides to fall underneath. The dough will very quickly go from a shaggy mess to a smooth dough. Repeat the process, turning the dough as you go. Fold the edges of the dough into the center and then turn over to leave to rest, formed into a smooth dough. After another 30 minutes to an hour, wet your hands and then repeat the process of lifting the dough and turning it. Do 4 or 5 turns, then rest again. Repeat the process again before leaving to bulk ferment. The dough is ready for shaping when it's gained volume and is slightly domed in the center. You're looking for an airiness and puffiness in your dough before you're ready to shape it. With sourdough, as with all yeast-based baking, it isn't possible to provide precise timings. Different starters, flours, climates and atmospheric conditions will affect how your dough will rise and the time it takes. With experience, you'll build a routine and learn how to predict how long each stage will take and how to control and manipulate this to suit your schedule. Identifying the completion of each step by eye is critical to the process. There are many ways to shape the dough. Having a rigid metal dough scraper is really useful in handling the dough and helping to form a tight shape, but is by no means essential. I like to shape the dough by first taking the sides, stretching them out and folding them into the middle of the dough. After that, I work from the top of the dough using a stitching method to tighten the shape. Finally, roll the dough over itself a couple of times. When working with a wet dough like sourdough, you need to move quickly with your hands and precisely. Don't hold too tightly to the dough and release the dough with confident, firm movements. If the gluten structure is strong enough, the dough will release without damage. Having shaped with your hands, use the scraper to move the dough across the surface of the worktop and back the other way, tightening the dough. Cover the dough with flour and bench rest for 10 to 15 minutes before repeating the shaping process to ensure a tightly shaped loaf. Invert the dough and place into a well-floured Banneton large bowl or loaf tin, seam side facing up, to rest overnight, or for 10 to 12 hours approximately. Rice flour is an excellent way of preventing sticking, as is the use of a fabric liner. I use a cotton napkin with rice flour worked into it. When you're ready to bake, preheat your oven to its maximum setting. Mine goes to around 250 to 270 degrees Celsius. Put your Dutch oven, pizza stone or baking sheets in as you heat the oven to ensure they're as hot as possible for when you add your dough. You want to transfer the heat to your dough as fast as possible to achieve a good oven spring. Using a razor blade or a sharp knife, score the dough deeply, making sure to go all the way across the loaf. This will help you get the maximum rise and make your loaf look great. Carefully transfer the loaf to the oven and bake for 20 minutes. After 20 minutes in the oven, remove the lid and bake for a further 15 minutes at 200 Celsius. The final and hardest step in the process is to leave the bread to cool completely before cutting. If you cut the bread whilst it's still hot, steam escapes and the bread loses volume and dries out faster. Sourdough doesn't have to be daunting or scary. It may take a few loaves to start to understand the rhythms and signs, but once that is cracked, it becomes a joy to bake and an incredibly rewarding craft.